At the first gate, they take your crown. You are Inanna, Queen of Heaven, the brightest goddess in the brightest pantheon the world has yet imagined. The morning star burns in your name. Lions draw your chariot. Whole cities exist because you wanted them to. And you have come to the gates of the underworld in your full regalia. Every ornament, every weapon, every symbol of who you are, because you are not a goddess who arrives anywhere half-dressed. The gatekeeper looks at you. He says nothing for a long moment. Then he reaches up, and the crown comes off your head. You ask what this means. He gives you the answer he will give 6 more times before this is over. Be satisfied, Inanna. A divine power of the underworld has been fulfilled. You must not open your mouth against the rights of this place. There are 6 more gates ahead. By the time you reach the last one, you will be naked, powerless, and standing in front of the only person in all the worlds your name cannot save you from. Your sister, the Queen of the Dead. What happens next is the oldest underworld story humanity has ever written down. Older than Persephone by more than 1,000 years, older than the Book of the Dead, older than the oldest verses of the Bible. It survives on broken tablets dug out of the dust of southern Iraq, written in a language no one has spoken aloud in thousands of years, and it has never stopped being true. Tonight we walk it gate by gate, slowly, the way the Sumerians wrote it. And by the 7th gate, you will understand why this particular descent has haunted every culture that's heard it. Why the goddess in this story dies, why she comes back, and what she leaves behind that none of the later versions ever quite manage to recover. So lower the lights. The world outside can wait. We are going somewhere very old, somewhere very deep, somewhere people have been going in their imagination for 4,000 years and counting. The gate is open. The gatekeeper is waiting. There is no rush at all. The story we are entering tonight was carved into wet clay by scribes who lived in cities that no longer exist, in a country that has been called by at least 6 different names, beside 2 rivers that still flow. Sumer, the flat plain between the Tigris and the Euphrates. The first place in human history where someone thought to write a story down rather than only tell it. And the first place where the story they chose to write was not a king's deeds or a war or a list of property, but a goddess, walking, alone, into a place no goddess was supposed to go. The poem we have is called by its first line. The Sumerians did not give books titles. They named them after the way they began. So this one is called From the Great Above, because that is how it opens. From the great heaven, she set her mind on the great below. And from those 11 words, 4,000 years of meditation on death and love and the price of returning have unspooled. The poem runs to about 400 lines. It exists in many copies, all incomplete, scattered across museums in Philadelphia, London, Berlin, Istanbul. Scholars have spent more than a century stitching them together. Samuel Noah Kramer worked on it for decades. Diane Volkstein turned his translation into the version most readers know. William Sladek did the doctoral dissertation that established the modern critical text. We owe them all a debt, because without them, what we are about to share would be silence. Settle in. There is no part of this you have to hold on to. The shape of it is what matters. The way it moves, the way it slows, the way it ends. Before there was a descent, there was Inanna, and to feel what is taken from her, you have to feel what she was. She was the patron goddess of the city of Uruk, in the south of what is now Iraq, and Uruk in her time was something close to the largest city on earth. Her temple, the Eanna, the name means house of heaven, sat at its center, raised on a platform of mud brick that you could see from miles out across the plain. Inside, priests and priestesses kept the daily offerings burning, the lamentations sounding, the sacred marriage rites alive. Her symbol, an 8-pointed star, was carved into walls and pressed into clay seals from the Persian Gulf to the mountains of Anatolia. And her presence, ancient even when it was first written down, reaches back further than the writing itself. The cuneiform sign for her name appears on the very oldest tablets we have, from the late 4th millennium before the Common Era, when writing was so new it had barely figured out it could record speech. She is, in that sense, one of the first beings in human history we have a name for. Older than nearly any god you have ever heard of. She was the goddess of love and the goddess of war, and you cannot understand her unless you understand that the Sumerians did not see those two things as opposites. They saw them as different expressions of the same force. The thing in you that takes another person into your bed, and the thing in you that picks up a weapon to keep them alive. Both of them desire. Both of them appetite. Both of them Inanna. Her hymns, written by the high priestess Enheduanna in the 23rd century before the Common Era, address her as the storm and the fragrance, the thunderhead and the soft cheek, the destroyer of mountains, and the goddess who makes the marriage bed sweet. Enheduanna, by the way, has the distinction of being the first author in human history we know by name. The first signed work of literature on Earth was written by a woman about a goddess in praise of contradictions. There is something in that worth keeping. A civilization that invented writing and immediately used it to praise a goddess for being impossible to summarize is a civilization that, on the whole, knew what it was about. Inanna was also Venus, the bright planet that rises before the sun in one season and sets after it in another. The Sumerians watched it carefully, and they noticed something the modern eye often misses. Venus disappears. For roughly 7 days every cycle, it vanishes from the sky entirely. Then it reappears on the other horizon, in a different role, transformed. The Sumerians called these two phases Morning Inanna and Evening Inanna, and they wrote her descent into the underworld as the explanation for what happens in those days when she is not in the sky. Keep that in mind. The 7 days, the 7 gates. We will return to it. She owned also the me. This is one of the strangest and most wonderful concepts in Sumerian thought. The me, pronounced me, were the divine ordinances of civilization. Not laws exactly, not commandments, decrees. There were over 100 of them, and they included everything from kingship and priesthood, and the art of the scribe to falsehood, lamentation, the destruction of cities, sexual intercourse, and the lighting of the way home at night. The me were not good or evil. They were the entire furniture of human life, the things that make a civilization, both the noble and the dreadful. Inanna got most of them by visiting the wisdom god Enki, getting him drunk on beer, and walking off with the lot. The Sumerians, a people who had clearly observed how families work, found this entirely plausible. So when she sets out for the underworld, she is not some shrinking maiden going down to be reformed. She is the most accomplished, the most adorned, the most armed deity in heaven, going somewhere she has every reason to think she can dominate. That is the woman the gatekeeper meets. That is the crown that comes off first. She told her servant, Ninshuba, the loyal minister, the one who spoke fair words, as the poem keeps calling her, that if she did not return in 3 days, Ninshuba was to begin the rites of mourning. Tear at her eyes, tear at her mouth, tear at her thighs, dress in a single sackcloth garment, then go from temple to temple and beg the great gods to bring her mistress back. Try Enlil first. If he refuses, try Nanna. If Nanna refuses, try Enki. He knows the food of life. He knows the water of life. He will surely save me. This is the kind of detail that makes the poem feel suddenly, alarmingly real. She has a plan. She has a backup. She has worked out the order of operations. Whatever Inanna is going down for, and the poem is genuinely ambiguous on this point, she does not believe she will come back without help. She is going prepared, but she is going scared. What was she actually doing? The text gives us competing answers, and this is one of the places where modern retellings tend to flatten what the original leaves jagged. The most common explanation is that she went to attend the funeral of Gugalana, her sister Ereshkigal's husband, a figure many scholars identify with the Bull of Heaven killed by Gilgamesh and Enkidu in the famous epic of Uruk. So she is going to a funeral. Family obligation, the respectful thing, but the language of the opening lines suggests something more. She abandoned heaven. She abandoned earth. She abandoned her temples. In Uruk, in Bad Tabira, in Zabalam, in Adab, in Nippur, in Kish, in Akkad. That is not the language of a sister stopping by for a service. That is the language of someone going for a long time. And when the gatekeeper relays the news to Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead does not say, "Oh, my poor sister," in mourning. She slaps her thigh. She bites her lip. She gives orders. She reacts the way you react when you find out someone is coming for your throne. Here is what most retellings leave out. The Sumerian poem suggests, in the way the words are weighted, that Inanna may have been going down to expand her empire. To add the underworld to the heavens she already ruled. To take her sister's throne, in the same casual way she had once walked into Enki's house and walked out with the entire furniture of civilization. If that is what she was doing, she was committing the oldest sin in mythology. Hubris, reaching past her allotted portion, walking in full regalia into the one realm that was not hers to walk into. Or maybe she was just going for the funeral. Maybe both. Maybe even she didn't know. The Sumerian scribes who copied this story for hundreds of years did not feel the need to resolve it for us, and we should resist the urge to resolve it now. The poem is wiser than we are. It lets her motive remain a question. The descent is what matters. Why she chose it stays in the dark where she went. She arrived at the great gate of Ganzir, the palace of the underworld at the edge of the realm of Kur, and she pounded on the door. "Open up, gatekeeper! Open up, Neti!" I alone would enter. And Neti, the chief gatekeeper, asked the question that was always asked at this threshold, the question every Mesopotamian listener already knew, because they had heard the line 100 times in 100 poems. "Who are you?" she told him. He went inside to consult the queen. The queen, having heard, gave her order. "Bolt the 7 gates of the underworld, then open them, one by one, and remove a piece of her at every threshold. At the first gate they take your crown, the turban for the open country, the headgear that marks you as a wanderer with permission, the symbol of your right to cross horizons. It comes off your head, and the gatekeeper hands it to an attendant who carries it away into the dark. You ask what this means. The gatekeeper gives you the line he will give 6 more times. Be satisfied, Inanna. A divine power of the underworld has been fulfilled. You must not open your mouth against the rights of this place. You walk forward. The first gate closes behind you. At the second gate, they take your earrings. The small lapis lazuli beads, the kind that came from the mountains 1,000 miles away, that meant your father loved you enough to send caravans of merchants into the Hindu Kush to bring back stones the color of the sky at evening. They unhook them gently. You feel the small weight leave your earlobes for the first time in centuries. The chamber is quieter without them. You did not know they had a sound until the sound is gone. Be satisfied, Inanna. A divine power of the underworld has been fulfilled. You walk forward. The second gate closes behind you. At the third gate, they take the strand of beads from your throat, the double row of carnelian and lapis that fell across your collarbones, the one the priestesses sang of in their hymns, the one they laid on your statue at the New Year festival. They lift it over your head with a strange, careful tenderness, the way you might handle a sleeping child. You begin, here, to feel the shape of what is happening. They are not punishing you. They are not robbing you. They are returning each thing to a place where it does not belong, the way you might leave coins at a shrine or shoes at a temple door. The gatekeeper does not speak unkindly. He does not speak with kindness either. He speaks the line, "Be satisfied, Inanna. A divine power of the underworld has been fulfilled." You walk forward. The third gate closes behind you. At the fourth gate, they take the twin egg-shaped stones from your breast, the ones that signified fertility, motherhood, the soft authority of the goddess who blesses the marriage bed. You did not, in life, ever bear a child. You were the patron of love rather than its consequence. But the stones were yours anyway, because Sumerian theology never demanded that a symbol mean only one thing. They lift them away. The weight that leaves your chest is small, and you would not have called it heavy until it was gone, the way you do not notice a hand resting on you until it lifts. Be satisfied, Inanna. A divine power of the underworld has been fulfilled. You walk forward. The fourth gate closes behind you. At the fifth gate, they take the gold ring from your hand, the one you used to seal documents, the one the kings of Uruk pressed into clay when they signed treaties, the one with your name on it, in the script that nobody outside the temples could read. They slip it from your finger. There are many ancient ways of saying you no longer have authority here, and the removal of a signet ring is the oldest and most elegant. Be satisfied, Inanna. A divine power of the underworld has been fulfilled. You walk forward. The fifth gate closes behind you. At the sixth gate, they take the lapis lazuli measuring rod and the measuring line from your hand. These are the instruments of the city, the tools by which boundaries are drawn, fields are surveyed, irrigation canals are aligned, the foundations of temples are laid out true. With these in your hand, you were the one who decided where the city ended and the wilderness began. Without them, you have lost the right to draw any line at all. They take them. The gatekeeper by now no longer needs to give the answer. You speak it with him, almost. The two of you, completing the rite together. Be satisfied, Inanna. A divine power of the underworld has been fulfilled. You walk forward. The sixth gate closes behind you. At the seventh gate, they take the pala, the royal robe, the garment of ladyship, the dress that marks you as the goddess who rules, and you stand naked. You do not, at this point, have a single thing left that was yours. Not the crown, not the jewels, not the ring, not the rod, not the dress, not the language of ladyship the gatekeeper has stopped using when he speaks to you. You are just the one who came down. The figure walking forward into the chamber where your sister sits. The seventh gate closes behind you. This is the moment, by the way, that has lasted 4,000 years. The moment that Egyptian funerary texts, Greek mystery cults, Roman initiation rites, and several modern psychological frameworks have all, in different vocabularies, attempted to talk about. The moment when a person goes through a doorway carrying who they have always been and comes out to the other side carrying nothing. People have been writing this moment ever since. They are still writing it. They will write it tomorrow, somewhere, in a poem they have not finished, in a book they have not opened. The Sumerians were not the only ones who knew it. They were just the first ones to put it into clay. Keep that in mind. We will come back to it. You stood in front of your sister. The text says you bowed low. which is one of the ways the Sumerians described someone who had finally understood, too late, what kind of room they had walked into. Ereshkigal, queen of the great below, did not look at you with anything resembling welcome. She rose from her throne. You, for reasons the poem does not explain, perhaps in the last reflex of a goddess used to taking thrones, sat on it. And then the 7 judges of the underworld surrounded you. The Inanna, the great judges, ancient even by the standards of the gods. The poem says only this: they looked at her, and it was the look of death. They spoke to her, and it was the speech of anger. That is the entire description. The Sumerians, who could spend 40 lines on the listing of cities Inanna had abandoned, gave the moment of her killing 2 sentences. The economy is deliberate. There are no torments. There is no list of crimes. There is just the look and the words and the result. The woman became a corpse, and the corpse was hung from a hook on the wall. The image is meant to be devastating, and it is. The most beautiful goddess in the world, the patron of love itself, hung from a peg in the chamber of her sister, like a side of meat. There is no metaphor here. The Sumerian phrase uzu nig sigga means rotting flesh. That is what she became. That is what the poem says she became. For 3 days and 3 nights, she hung there. Above ground, the world began to suffer in a particular way. In the Akkadian version of the story, the consequences are spelled out plainly. Every kind of generation ceased. Bulls did not mount cows. Donkeys did not mount jennets. Humans did not lie down with each other. The animals stopped giving birth. The fields stopped putting up shoots. Without the goddess of desire, there was no desire. And without desire, the world began, very quietly, to stop. Above ground, Ninshuba was counting. 1 day, 2 days, 3. On the morning of the 4th, she put on the single sackcloth her mistress had told her to wear. She tore at her face. She tore at her body. She set out for the temples. Ninshuba went first to Enlil, the king of the gods, the lord of the wind and the mountain. She made the case her mistress had taught her. Father Enlil, do not let your daughter perish in the underworld. Do not let your bright silver be tarnished there. Do not let your fine lapis be shattered. Enlil listened. Enlil considered. Enlil refused. She had her own portion. She wanted more. The one who has gone to the underworld does not return. Ninshuba went to Nanna, the moon god, Inanna's father in some traditions. She made the same case. The same answer came back. The moon, which had watched her daughter's every coronation, would not lift a finger to save her now. She went, finally, to Eridu, the southernmost city of Sumer, the oldest city the Sumerians knew, the city of Enki, the god of wisdom, the god of fresh water, the god of magic and trickery, and the deep underground sea where all knowing began. She made the case again, and Enki, who had always been a little fonder of Inanna than he should have been, did the thing the other gods had refused to do. He grieved. My daughter, what has happened to her? My beloved, what has befallen her? I am troubled. I am troubled. He took dirt from under the fingernails of 2 of his fingers. And stop here, because this is the kind of detail that tells you the Sumerians had been telling this story for so long they could afford to be playful with the smallest moments. And from those 2 pinches of dirt, he made 2 beings. The text calls them Kurgara and Galatura. They were neither male nor female, neither living nor dead, neither one thing nor another. They were, by their very nature, things that did not fit into any category the underworld had a rule for. Which is why, in a story full of rules, They were the only beings who could go and not be caught. This is the part of the story that scholars have argued about for a century. The Kurgara and Galatura, in actual Sumerian temple practice, were not invented for this myth. They were real human beings. They were the gender-nonconforming priest-singers who served Inanna's cult, who sang her lamentations in a dialect of Sumerian called Emesel, sometimes reserved for women's speech. They walked between categories in life, and so the poem made them the ones who could walk between worlds, which is to say, this is one of the oldest stories on Earth, and one of its central rescue agents are queer temple priests. The Sumerians, 4,000 years before our debates, simply included them in the cosmic order and moved on. Enki gave the two beings the food of life and the water of life. He told them what to do. Slip into the underworld like flies through a crack. You will find the queen in agony. She will be moaning. Whatever she moans, moan it back to her. When she asks what you want, ask for the corpse on the hook. And so they slipped down through the gates that did not see them, into the throne room where Ereshkigal lay, and they found her exactly as Enki had said. She was groaning. She was in the pain that some translators read as labor pains, and others read as grief, and others read as both at once. For the queen of the underworld is, in some Sumerian texts, perpetually in the act of giving birth to the dead, which is to say, never not in pain. When she said, "Oh, my insides," they said, "Oh, your insides." When she said, "Oh, my back," they said, "Oh, your back." Nothing more. They simply mirrored her suffering. And after centuries of being feared and avoided, and approached only with bargains and tribute, this was the first time in anyone's memory that someone had simply sat with the queen of the dead in her pain and said, "Yes, we see it. It hurts." She looked up. She offered them anything. Rivers of water, fields of grain. They asked for the corpse on the hook. She gave it to them, perhaps not even understanding in that moment what she was giving away. They sprinkled the food of life on the body. They sprinkled the water of life. And Inanna, who had been dead for 3 days, sat up. She walked back through the 7 gates. At each one, the items they had taken from her were returned. The robe, the rod, the ring, the stones, the beads, the earrings, the crown. By the time she stepped back out under the sky, she was, at least to the eye, the same goddess she had been when she went down. But she was not the same goddess. Because the underworld does not let you leave for nothing. The Annuna, the great judges, had given their decision, and the decision was law. No one rises from the underworld unmarked. No one rises without a substitute. Send someone in your place. And so the Gala, the demons of the underworld, the ones who eat no food and drink no water and know no human pleasure, followed her up, hovering at her shoulder, demanding that she choose. She came to her city. Ninshuba ran to meet her, dressed in sackcloth, weeping, having torn her own face for 3 days. The Gala reached for her. "Take this one," they said. Inanna refused. "Not Ninshuba, not the one who saved me, not the one who walked from temple to beg for my life. Take someone else." She came to her son Shara, who was dressed in mourning, who had not slept since she went under. The Gala reached for him. She refused. She came to her son Lulal, who was the same. She refused. Then she came to the great apple tree on the plain of Kulaba, outside the city, where she had once danced as a young goddess, and there she saw her husband, Dumuzi, the shepherd, the king, the young man whose body she had blessed in 1,000 love songs. He was sitting on her throne. He was wearing his finest garments. He had not torn his face. He had not put on sackcloth. He had not, in 3 days, stopped to mourn her. He was, in fact, doing rather well in her absence. The poem says Inanna fixed on him the eye of death, the same look the 7 judges had used on her. She turned to the gala, and she said the word that ends the story: him. This is, you may notice, a difficult moment for those who want Inanna to be a heroine. She is, and also, she is the goddess of love, who has just sentenced her husband to die because he failed to grieve her properly. The Sumerians, who had been married for at least a few thousand years by the time they wrote this down, found this entirely plausible too. Dumuzi ran. He prayed to the sun god, his brother-in-law Utu, who turned him into a snake to slip away. The gala caught him anyway. They dragged him down to the underworld, and there, in the very place his wife had just escaped, he hung in her stead. Time passed. Inanna grieved. The poem suggests, gently, that she had not entirely meant it, that the eye of death had been the reflex of someone newly returned from death herself, that when the rage left her, what remained was that she had loved him. His sister, Inanna, who was a goddess of grain and wine and the writing of dreams, came to her. She offered to share his sentence. 6 months in the underworld for him, 6 months for her, each of them spending half the year below, half the year above. Inanna agreed, and so was created, the Sumerians believed, the seasons. Dumuzi went down in summer, and the grass dried, and the lambs grew thin, and the wells ran low, because the shepherd was in the underworld. He came back in autumn, when the rains returned, and the green came up out of the ground, because he had been brought back to her. The hot, dry months of Mesopotamian midsummer were named for him. The ritual mourning that whole cities performed in those months was for him. Weeping for Tammuz, it was called by the time the prophet Ezekiel saw it being done at the gates of Jerusalem, more than 1,000 years after the poem was first written down. More than 1,000 years, and they were still weeping for him. Now here is the detail the popular retellings almost never mention, and it changes the meaning of everything you have just heard. The Sumerians watched the sky carefully. They watched Venus more carefully than any other star, because Venus is brighter than any star, and because Venus does something the other planets do not. It disappears. Not for one night, for 7 nights, sometimes a few more. Modern astronomers have measured the gap as roughly 7 to 23 days, depending on the cycle, but the Sumerians, who counted in sevens, fixed on 7. 7 nights when the planet was nowhere in the sky. 7 nights of disappearance. And then, on the 8th dawn, Venus would rise again, but in the opposite role. The evening star had become the morning star, or the morning star had become the evening star, and the goddess had transformed. 7 gates, 7 days, 7 nights below, 7 days returning. This is the structural secret of the descent. The poem we have been reading is not only a story, it is a calendar. It is the Sumerian explanation for the most precise and observable fact about the planet they had named for their highest goddess. Every time Venus disappeared from the evening sky, Inanna had gone down through the gates again. Every time she rose in the morning, she had returned. The poem was, among many other things, an astronomical instruction manual. The Mesopotamian astronomers who composed the Venus tablet of Ammisaduqa, the oldest surviving record of planetary observations, recording 21 years of Venus risings, were doing the same work the poet of the descent was doing, watching the goddess, counting her nights below, knowing she would come back, always. That was the point. The grief was real, and the disappearance was real, and the goddess truly died. And yet every cycle, she returned. The story that frightened was also the story that consoled. This is what makes the descent different from the underworld stories that came after it. Persephone, more than 1,000 years later, would be abducted. Eurydice would be lost. Orpheus would fail. The descent of the soul into Hades, in the Greek imagination, became something to fear. But Inanna walked down on her own feet. She knew what she was doing, even if the poem keeps the why ambiguous. And she came back. The descent was the process, not the punishment. The stripping at the gates was not a torture. It was a release. Because what is essential cannot be taken from you, and the seventh gate is the place where you discover that, not the moment your authority ends. The moment your authority is revealed never to have been the thing that mattered. The Sumerians, who lived in a world without a heaven, who believed that everyone, king and slave, hero and child, went to the same dusty underworld where the dead ate clay and drank from muddy puddles and existed in a kind of permanent shadow of their lives above, somehow built into their oldest myth. A hint that this was not the whole of it. That somewhere, between the seventh gate and the throne, there was a thing that did not die, a thing the underworld had no rule for, a thing the gates could not take. They never named it. They were too careful for that, but they wrote it into the structure of the descent, and we have been reading it for 4,000 years. The story is finished now, or rather, it has reached the place where stories like this one don't end so much as settle. Into memory, into the dark, into the quiet space where meaning lives after the words stop. At the first gate, they take your crown. They will keep taking, gate by gate, every part of you that you mistook for yourself. And at the seventh gate, when there is nothing left, you will stand naked in front of the only person whose voice was ever going to matter, and you will discover what the Sumerians knew before any of us. That the part of you the gates could not touch was the part that came down to begin with. Not the crown, not the jewels, not the robe, the walking, the choosing, the going. This is the thing the 4,000-year-old story has been carrying for us all this time, in the mouths of priestess and the hands of scribes and the tablets dug out of the ruins of Nippur, waiting for someone, on some night, to listen. You don't have to hold on to any of it. The shape of it is already in you. It always was. If this story found you at the right moment, if there is something tonight you have already been quietly walking through, or something you suspect you may have to walk through soon, consider subscribing to Sleepable Mythology. There are more of these waiting. More gods, more goddesses, more stories 4,000 years old that are still, somehow, about you. Next time, we are going further upriver, into the city of Uruk itself, into the story of the king who watched his closest friend die and could not accept it. Gilgamesh, the oldest hero in the world, and his impossible journey toward the one thing no goddess and no descent and no return could ever give him. But that is for another night. For now, the gates are closing behind you in the right direction. The crown is back on your head. The dress is back across your shoulders. The morning star is rising in the east. The descent is finished. Rest now. The goddess made it home. Good night.